Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Many Canadians are struggling to make ends meet at this time. And when we see this Liberal government giving cushy multi-million-dollar contracts to their friends, Canadians feel cheated. Imagine being a taxpayer that's struggling to pay the rent, to buy food, and to hear that billions of dollars of your tax dollars are being wasted by government. This year, food will cost families $700 more this year than it did last year. Food insecurity has become such a problem in this country that since 2021, food banks have seen a 50% increase in visits. According to the latest data from Statistics Canada, 8.7 million Canadians were food insecure in 2023, including 2.1 million children. Even poverty diseases like scurvy are resurfacing in Canada, and doctors are being warned to look out for them. We are in a crisis, Madam Speaker. We have never seen this kind of government waste and suffering of Canadians ever before in this nation. Yet, here we are debating a matter of privilege because this government's negligence, incompetence, and corruption has resurfaced in the most recent scandal. This negligence continues because after 9 long years of this Liberal administration, it is being propped up by the NDP. We would not be here today spending days debating this matter of parliamentary privilege if this government was prioritizing the best interest of Canadians. Madam Speaker, instead of debating, we would be working on issues that are impacting Canadians, including record-high inflation, cost of living, and a housing crisis and a crime crisis and chaos in the streets. Crises that have erupted because of the failed policies and leadership of this Prime Minister and his NDP coalition partners. While this is happening, the government has once again chosen to serve their best interest and not the best interest of Canadians. They have failed to take the ethical path and to demonstrate leadership, transparency, and accountability by handing over the documents that are at the very center of this motion and at the very center of the $400 million scandal. Let us review now some of the history that has got us to this point. Sustainable Development Technology Canada was a $1 billion fund that was supported by multiple governments, and in fact, it ran smoothly without incident up until...
The Honourable Member, there's a point of order from the Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was referred that we have record inflation here, but when you do a quick search, actually we had a record inflation under Brian Mulroney.
Point of debate. I'm sorry to the Honourable Member, but the Honourable Member can make reference to it in his question. The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So in reviewing the history, Sustainable Development Technology Canada was a $1 billion fund that was supported by multiple governments and ran smoothly. In fact, without incident until 2017. It was designed with a noble cause of helping green technology startups get off the ground, with some government support in order to accelerate action in climate and the environment. Then, the Prime Minister appointed a new Liberal board chair to the SDTC. However, after Conservatives put forward a motion asking for the Auditor General to conduct audits into the SDTC, she found that the fund had approved projects for funding that are ineligible for taxpayer funds. She further found that the SDTC executives violated at least $400 million of taxpayer funds. 80% of the cases the Auditor General looked at had conflicts of interest. She also found that the Green Slush Fund had frequently overstated the environmental benefits of the projects that they funded. Madam Speaker, we know that her findings were just the tip of the iceberg. She did not conduct an exhaustive audit. She looked just at a sample of cases and investigated them, and this sample revealed such conflicts of interest that are a part of this privilege motion today. Yet 80% of those cases were found in violation of the law. We also know that some of those at the center of the scandal, the Liberal-appointed board members who benefited from these contracts, managed to jump ship and secure other government-appointed positions. One of the Green Slush Fund directors, Andre-Lise Methot, actually admitted to several conflicts of interest with funds that went to companies that she had a financial interest in. In fact, the Minister of Environment, prior to joining Cabinet, served as a strategic advisor for a venture capital firm called Cycle Capital from 2009 to 2018. This is the same firm that Ms. Methot founded and was the managing partner of. The same firm that received a significant amount of SDTC funding while she sat on the board. As this scandal was coming out, she was then coincidentally appointed to the board of a $35 billion Canada Infrastructure Bank. This is the same bank where Liberal-friendly McKinsey consultants have been deeply involved in. So she went from one plum board appointment to another, even after finding that she had engaged in conflict of interest by enriching companies that she had an interest in while she sat on the board. She has since resigned, but yet Ms. Methot is implicated in mishandling $42 million of taxpayer funds by awarding contracts to companies she had financial interest in. At the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, Conservatives are right now trying to get to the bottom of this scandal, and we have put forward a motion to investigate this issue. Madam Speaker, it is completely unacceptable that those who repeatedly violate conflict of interest policies should be promoted to plump government positions because they have connections with Liberal insiders. How is it that this government thought it was perfectly fine to appoint her to the Canada Infrastructure Bank after she was found to have violated conflict of interest laws to enrich her own company? And so, in light of all these egregious refusals to honor the authority of Parliament and to act in a way that is befitting of the Canadian democracy, Conservatives have been forced to put forward a motion in this House to demand that the government get to the bottom of the Green Slush Fund scandal by handing over all of the files, communications, and financial records to Parliament. Parliament would then hand over all documents to the RCMP for further investigation. However, after that motion passed, the 30-day deadline came and went without action. What did we find? Some departments partially complied and some blatantly disobeyed the order. The government failed to hand over the documents and fell into contempt of this Parliament. As Mr. Speaker ruled on this matter, the Speaker of the House stated that in some instances only partial disclosures were made, owing either to redactions or the withholding of documents. In one instance, the House order was met with complete refusal. End quote. The Department of Justice alone withheld 10,000 pages from Parliament. The Speaker of the House decided that the matter of privilege, ruling that the Liberals violated the will of Parliament to turn over the evidence so that the RCMP could conduct the criminal investigation. Since then, the RCMP has founded and has confirmed that they are indeed investigating this scandal and that it is ongoing. This is not a trivial political matter, Madam Speaker. This is not a trivial matter that has seized this House. The RCMP are not investigating because the Conservative opposition has directed them to do so. They are, in fact, an independent agency. They are investigating because there is reasonable grounds upon which to base an investigation that offenses have been committed under the Criminal Code. Once they investigate, they will decide what to do with the documents in question and whether to prosecute. That is in their sole discretion. They have full power to conduct their investigation within the bounds of the law. Madam Speaker, Parliament has supremacy in our constitutional democracy. It has supremacy about this government. It has supremacy above this Prime Minister. The House of Commons is the representation of the people of Canada, and as such has powers that are absolute and within the authority as afforded by our Constitution. Yet, what we see here is an open contempt of authority. This government has demonstrated a complete lack of respect for the powers of Parliament to order the production of documents, which is key to this House's role to act as a check and balance on the executive branch. For months, this government has flouted the authority of Parliament by refusing to comply with the will of Parliament in this matter. If we allow this to continue, Madam Speaker, when will this attack on Parliament's authority end? We are at risk of having the chamber of the people of this great nation in this House of Commons devolve into nothing more than an echo chamber without true power to exercise its role and to do the work of the people in this House. The very strength of our democratic institutions lies within this House's power to put a check on the power of the executive branch, to oppose and expose ethical breaches. In other words, the issue goes to the very heart of our democracy, and as such is a litmus test of its strength. The question is, what does this Liberal government have to hide? Why are they so desperate to keep these documents hidden from Canadians? How deep does this corruption we We do know that this Liberal government has been so embarrassed by the revelations of mismanagement by the Green Slush Fund that they decided to outright abolish it, or at least transfer it to another government agency. However, none of this absolves the SDTC, nor does it absolve this government from their responsibility to Canadians. This Liberal government must provide Parliament and the RCMP with answers as to what they knew, also when they knew it, and how this happened, and how deep this corruption goes. This paralysis of Parliament could be over today if the Liberals displayed the moral courage to comply with the order of this House by turning over the documents for the RCMP to investigate. But they do not want to, and we all know why. These files would certainly reveal the depth of corruption at the Green Slush Fund over the past 9 years. And we've seen this movie before, Madam Speaker. In 2019, when it was revealed that scientists working on Canada's highest security lab were collaborating clandestinely with the People's Republic of China, it took 10 months for these scientists to be fired. When the House first asked for the documents to be turned over, the security breach also to be released, the Liberals refused. They even took the Speaker to court, Madam Speaker. They took the former Speaker to court in order to cover up their failure. Are we going to allow this tired government to continue to flout authority of Parliament as they betray the trust of Canadians with their endless scandals and reckless management of our economy? Let us not forget that the NDP have been complicit in these scandals by propping up this government with their coalition deal. It is clear that both the Prime Minister and the NDP have been desperately clinging to power. Only Conservatives are committed to getting to the bottom of these scandals. My constituents expect me to hold government to account, Madam Speaker, not prop it up. They expect me to represent their interests and to fight for their concerns. The truth is that our democracy and our shared Canadian dream is at risk. We are seeing a sharp decline. We have seen a sharp decline in the state of our nation over the last 9 years. For one, Canadians are poorer than they were 9 years ago. Since 2016, the cost of an average home in my constituency of Haldimand, Norfolk, has increased by over 115%. Families now need a household income of $208,000 to own a home. Between 2023 and 2024, an average cost of one-bedroom rental unit increased by 35%, from $892 to $1,190 per month. Madam Speaker,
I'm going to interrupt the honourable member a few moments. Is it possible to check what's happening on the courtyard? There's a lot of noise and laughter coming through. Thank you. The honourable member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, even the healthcare system has become less reliable and less accessible than it was 9 years ago. Streets are less safe, freedom of speech and freedom of thought is more restricted than it was 9 years ago. In closing, Madam Speaker, this motion is about the $400 million siphoned to Liberal friends, perhaps even stolen. Canadian tax dollars have been mismanaged at a time when Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. Many are living paycheck to paycheck. Madam Speaker, in closing, it is time for this government to own up to their record and let Canadians decide for themselves. We need to restore transparency, we need to restore integrity, and we need to ensure that taxpayers are once again put first. This is the magnitude of what hangs in the balance of what we are debating today. Thank you.
Before we go to questions and comments, I'd like to remind all members that we do not need timers. We look at the time, and it can be very bothersome for interpreters. Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to just, at the beginning of the member's speech, she referred to the importance of the work that we do in this place and how we serve Canadians. We are the House of Commons, after all. At the end of her speech, she referred to the importance of respecting tax dollars and taxpayers to ensure that they have the benefits and services that they need and they need to receive. Yesterday, one of her colleagues spoke within his speech about how part of why they were delaying this privilege motion was because they did not want the government to be able to introduce the Ways and Means motion, which would actually help so many Canadians and actually ensure that each Canadian corporation paid their fair share. My question to the member would be, first of all, is she aware of any political party or any member of Parliament who opposes this question of privilege? Because I believe all members support this question of privilege, respecting the Speaker's ruling and watching the process unfold so that we can get to the work of this important privilege motion, but also the work of this chamber. Can the member explain to this House why she does not want to hear the question be called so that we can get to the work and respect taxpayers and the public purse? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Haldimand Northfolk.
Madam Speaker, this is a very, very simple issue. It is an issue of having the Liberals comply with this House's order to turn over the documents to the RCMP. This is what we are here to debate today. This is an issue that is very important to Canadians because when we see continuous mismanagement of taxpayers' dollars, when we witness millions and billions sometimes of dollars being siphoned off to agencies and to organizations and companies in which Liberal appointed board members have an interest, Canadians are seeing the erosion of our very, very important democratic system. And so we need to bring back accountability. And the way to bring back accountability is for the Liberals to agree to comply with this House's order and produce the documents.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for the speech. SDTC is a reminder that what was considered a good idea within the Liberal Party ended up ruining a program that is actually necessary, a program to invest in companies studying technologies for clean growth and development. Now, what about the money that was granted to SDTC? Would the colleague agree that this money continue to fund such businesses, but in a responsible way, not how the government did?
Alderman Norfolk.
I thank my colleague for her question. The funds that were misappropriated and were sent to companies in which board members had an interest, that is what is at issue today, Madam Speaker. The issue is, we know that environmental protection is something that everybody in this House agrees on. But the Auditor General found that many of these projects did not even have an environmental component. Many of these projects did not fund even what they said they were going to fund. And so there is a breach of trust here that has to be addressed. And the only way it can be addressed is by turning over those documents.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, the documents actually in terms of testimony for SDTC is available on Open Parliament for the Industry Committee, and I invite the member to look at those. One of the things I am kind of interested, though, especially listening to the speech here, is that perhaps we should be subpoenaing Stephen Harper, Maxime Bernier, and Tony Clement, who actually were part of empowering Annette Verschuren at SDTC during this process. And for those that aren't aware, Stephen Harper was very much part of Annette Verschuren's rise in this chamber. Maxime Bernier, who the Conservatives had running as a leadership candidate at one point, is now part of another party, was also industry minister. And Tony Clement as well, who I've seen also on this place with this lobby that is actually still in the universe of the Conservative Party, was part of Annette Verschuren's rise and as well. So perhaps I'd like to ask the member right now in the Conservative Party, would they agree to subpoenaing Stephen Harper, Maxime Bernier, and Tony Clement, because their fingerprints are all over this?
The honourable member for Haldimand, Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important that when we are dealing with such an important issue and Canadians are watching, that we do not engage in misinformation and that we present Canadians with the totality of the information. So I thank my honourable colleague for his question, and I do want to note that the SDTC is an organization that actually functioned quite well up until 2017, and it did good work. But then we saw the Liberal appointment of board members change the way that this entity was functioning, and we saw a proliferation of corruption and mismanagement and siphoning off money to enrich politicians and to enrich Liberal friends, while Canadians are struggling to buy food, while Canadians are struggling to heat their homes, while Canadians can barely pay for their daily living expenses. We have politicians and politicians' friends getting rich off of taxpayers. That is egregious, and that is something that every member of this House should oppose and stand against.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire, and I'm guessing we're going around in the circle. I apologize to which way who was next in the schedule. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the member just finished saying misinformation, and she talks about Liberal friendly. The individual she's talking about was a political advisor to Brian Mulroney, to Stephen Harper, and Jim Flaherty. She is a major contributor to the Conservative Party of Canada, thousands of dollars. And yes, we did appoint her. I agree, yeah. And with hindsight, maybe she shouldn't have been appointed given in terms of what has taken place. Having said that, the games that the Conservative play over the last 3 weeks is disgraceful. At the same time, we have a leader of the official opposition that is scared to get a security clearance so that he can actually take a look at what's happening on foreign interference. Why will the Conservative Party not stop playing this game and get serious about the issues that Canadians are having to face, Mr. Speaker? And a good starting point would be for the leader of the Conservative Party to get the security clearance necessary so he can see the so-called 11 names.
Honourable Member for Haldimand, Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, you know, sometimes I feel sorry for the people at home who have to sit and watch what happens in this House sometimes, because what we are seeing is the art of deception by misdirection. That's what the Liberals practice. They switch and they change the narrative in order to deflect from what is really happening. And what is really happening here, Mr. Speaker, is that we are seeking to have documents turned over. It is a simple issue, yet we see a desperate attempt of the Liberals to scapegoat everybody, including the RCMP, instead of doing what they are supposed to do, and that is be accountable to the people of Canada that elect them and pay their salaries.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened closely to my honourable colleague's answer to my colleague from Terrebonne's question, but I wasn't especially satisfied with the answer, so I'll reword the question. A green fund would not be like investing in oil and gas. they get so many tax credits. The government gives so much money to oil and gas that they don't even have $3 billion for seniors to give seniors a break and a higher quality of life. So if the Conservatives formed government, would they care as much about getting to the bottom of things, getting the truth?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have always had an environmental plan, and we don't morph it into a tax revenue generating scheme. We've always done that. We've done that under Stephen Harper, and we did a very good job of protecting the environment, and we will continue to do so. In order to move forward, we are simply asking for the production of the documents.